As millions of people continue to suffer during the coronavirus pandemic, the entire world is holding out for a cure.
As of now, there's no evidence that any drug actually reduces the mortality in patients who have COVID-19.
Our clinical trials show that hydroxychloroquine does not prevent COVID-19 after someone has been exposed to someone with coronavirus.
We're beginning a new trial for selected NHS patients of an antiviral drug called Remdesivir. There have already been some promising early results on coronavirus patients, with early data suggesting it can shorten recovery time by around 4 days.
So a lot of drugs are being repurposed for the use of COVID, whether it be for prophylaxis or for the treatment of COVID.
The coronavirus pandemic is a test for national governments, the global scientific community and the pharmaceutical industry. The stakes could hardly be higher. How close are we to curing COVID-19? All over the world, scientists are rushing to find a drug to cure the coronavirus. As part of that search, they're taking a number of different approaches. One potential option, antivirals. They work by preventing the virus from multiplying in the body. But scientists say it could take years to discover an antiviral specific to COVID-19. Another line of attack, anti-inflammatories. Those kinds of drugs work by calming down an overactive immune response. This applies especially to patients who fall severely ill. Finally, there are antibody treatments. That's when an antibody specific to the coronavirus binds to it and kills it. One drug that's attracted a lot of attention during the pandemic is hydroxychloroquine, used to treat malaria. US President Donald Trump claimed he was taking it to help ward off the coronavirus, a course of action scientists do not recommend. That said, there still appears to be some confusion about the drug's effects. Take a look.
The drug hydroxychloroquine has been on the market for decades as a malaria remedy that can prevent pathogens from infecting cells. But does it also work with COVID-19? It had shown a certain effectiveness in laboratory tests. Beyond that, so far, there was little to be said, except for some background noise. The loudest voice was that of the US president.
Whatever happened to him, by the way? I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
When?
Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it.
He doesn't have coronavirus. At the same time, there's no scientific evidence the remedy can have a preventative effect. On the contrary.
Our clinical trials show that hydroxychloroquine does not prevent COVID-19 after someone has been exposed to someone with coronavirus.
But does the drug at least help in the treatment of COVID-19 patients? No, said a study published at the end of May in one of the world's oldest and most respected medical journals, The Lancet.
On Friday, The Lancet, as you know, published an observational study on hydroxychloroquine. The authors reported that among patients receiving the drug, they estimated a higher mortality rate.
The WHO immediately halted studies of the antimalarials, citing the risk of heart problems. Then a few days later, the Lancet study turned out to be useless. The Lancet retracted the text over concerns about the quality of the data behind it. The WHO resumed its trials. But precious time had been lost to find out if hydroxychloroquine can help COVID-19 patients. Worse still, these kind of half-baked scientific articles undermine public trust in scientific research. It's a devastating loss of trust at a time when the whole world is waiting for results from drug research that could mean the difference between life and death.
Now, hydroxychloroquine is just one of many drugs that are being trialled in a bid to find a treatment for the coronavirus. To find out about the latest research, I'm joined now by Dr. Nick Kamak. He's the COVID-19 Therapeutics Accelerator Lead at the Wellcome Trust in the UK. Dr. Kamak, thanks for joining us. A number of countries have now approved Remdesivir to treat COVID-19 patients. What can you tell me about that drug?
So Remdesivir acts by inhibiting the replication of this, what is a new virus for us. And we expect it to work particularly well early in the infection cycle. Up to now, it's been tested out in later stage patients and shown some benefit, and hence the FDA has given it emergency use approval. And that basically means they're seeing indications that it's doing something. That will continue to monitor. The safety database for that molecule will be built up alongside further studies in different patient groups.
Now, there's a lot of pressure, of course, to get treatments approved as fast as possible. Is there a risk of cutting corners in these trials?
Well, currently we're looking at repurposed medicines. Those are medicines that are already used in different indications in sick people. And so we know there are safe approved doses. So in that respect, all we're really looking for is efficacy of these repurposed medicines. And so we can move fairly quickly once we see an indication of some activity against COVID-19.
And how applicable can a trial done in one place be to the rest of the world?
So with a therapeutic for COVID-19 and the mechanisms of action of the new drugs that we're looking at, I think a trial done in one country is applicable to its use in another country. One thing we do need to take into consideration is the effect of different drugs with different comorbidities. So, for example, people living with HIV or with other treatments that they receive for other conditions that they may have. So that's something that we do have to look at carefully.
Let's talk then about accessibility. How can we ensure that a drug, once approved, will be available to everybody?
So this is the big challenge. This coronavirus is a new virus. It's a pandemic. It's happening around the world. And at the Therapeutic Accelerator, we're particularly concerned about low middle-income countries. And as you say, access is a key part of that. So there have been a lot of activities, particularly here in Europe, with the European Commission and a pledging event where countries pledge to support with funds the access of these medicines for everybody that needs them around the world. It's absolutely required to be able to have that money to be able to provide these drugs to folk in low and middle income countries.
Dr. Nick Kamak, thanks so much for your insights. Time now to answer your questions about COVID-19. Over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
Is it true that patients who are on ventilators suffer from delirium?
Doctors say spending just a week in intensive care affects some patients as badly as a major head injury, and the symptoms it causes can persist for months. Delirium among people who have been put on ventilators for long periods is common. And if you put yourself in their place, it's easy to understand why. I mean, you're extremely ill and you're heavily sedated. And if you do have any moments approaching consciousness, then you're surrounded by anonymous figures who are swathed from head to toe in this protective gear. It's little wonder that a major concern for people who survive COVID-19 is the long-term trauma it might cause, not just to the body, but also to the intellect and to the psyche.
If a second wave is a possibility, why are economies reopening? Won't that risk more lives?
Yes, it will. Viewed from a global perspective, the number of confirmed new cases continues to trend upwards, and it could take months to peak. But many countries are moving to reopen their economies because the alternative, they say, would be economic disaster on an even greater scale than we have already. So even though lockdowns are ending, outbreaks in many places are not. And that means worrying about a second wave at this point is premature. I mean, we're still riding this first one. Basically, relaxing lockdowns in many countries means tacitly accepting more infections and more deaths. But the governments doing it don't see any other way to prevent what they view as an even worse solution, which would be economic meltdown on an even more unprecedented scale.
Has journalism changed during COVID-19, and how?
I can only speak for myself, but I think that for most journalists, although a huge amount has likely changed during this pandemic, some things remain fundamentally the same. I could go on and on about what's different for me now than it was 4 months ago, but one huge change has definitely been working for international TV from my living room with pretty basic video technology. That's been a pretty steep learning curve. Another is the sheer amount of information that I have to sift through every day, a lot of it conflicting. What's stayed the same, I guess, for me at least, is how I process reports and studies. And that boils down to verifying any new information from as many different reputable sources as possible, so that what I'm saying hopefully provides reliable, relevant information and doesn't just add to the noise.